Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Welcome to another episode of The Nuanced. In this session, we are going to discuss and analyze the groundbreaking developments that have occurred in West Asia over the last couple of weeks. Israel has mounted major attacks against Hezbollah based out of Lebanon, and it has even eliminated the chief of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah. This happens to be one of the biggest developments in West Asia in recent decades. And just few hours ago, today we have received reports of Israel carrying out a ground invasion into southern Lebanon, which risks an all-out escalation in West Asia, possibly leading to a bigger war between Israel and Hezbollah. These tensions could even drag other regional powers like Iran into the conflict, leading to a possible conflict between Israel and Iran, which could even drag global powers such as United States into a confrontation with Iran and its proxies. So in this context, the developments of the last couple of weeks, especially the last few days, is extremely crucial and important from India's perspective. So in this session, we shall understand all the key details related to these developments. We'll understand the background and we'll also talk about the recent developments that have occurred. Then we will analyze the impact of these developments, especially on India's interests. Now, before we start the discussion, if you guys are liking our initiatives, do express your support by pressing the like button. Do let us know what you think about our initiatives in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So let's begin the discussion by going back in time by a few months. Last year on October 7, 2023, Hamas, an extremist organization based out of Gaza Strip, carried out a deadly attack against Israel. In this terror attack, 1,000 plus Israeli civilians were killed, and immediately Israel launched a full-fledged retaliation against Hamas. This marked the beginning of the Gaza war, and over the last few months, Israel has used brutal force in Gaza while targeting Hamas. Israel stands accused of using disproportionate force, as a result of which more than 40,000 Palestinians have lost their lives, leading to a humanitarian tragedy in Gaza. So as the Gaza war continues, we are seeing new shocking developments towards the northern borders of Israel towards Lebanon. Now what you're seeing in this region over the last few months is essentially a covert proxy war being played out between Israel and Iran. These extremist groups, Hamas, the Hezbollah and even the Houthis, they're all proxies which have been sponsored by Iran as part of its rivalry against Israel. This is an age-old geopolitical rivalry in the region. In 1979, when the Iranian Revolution took place and the then Shah of Iran was thrown out, led by radical conservative Shia clerics, Iran turned into a conservative theological state, and ever since, under the leadership of the Ayatollah, the supreme commander of Iran or the supreme leader of Iran, it has built enmity and rivalry with Israel. Over the Palestinian question, Iran has pledged complete support to the liberation of Palestine, even at the cost of eliminating Israel from the map. And in return, Israel has targeted and countered Iran. So as part of these rivalries, Iran has nurtured several proxy extremist groups in the region as part of a covert war to target Israeli and even American interests, given that United States is the biggest supporter of Israel. And Israel and US are no less. They have tried countering Iran by targeting Iran's nuclear weapons program, by assassinating top Iranian officials and even nuclear scientists. So this conflict has acquired a new shocking level which really threatens peace and stability across the West Asia region. So following last year's attack by Hamas, Israel went to a full-fledged war in Gaza, and as the Gaza war escalated, Iran activated some of these proxies in order to show support to Hamas. Iran activated the Houthis in Yemen and as well as the Hezbollah, a very powerful militant organization based out of Lebanon, with factions present in neighboring Iraq and Syria as well. These are the proxy groups that Iran has cultivated over the years as part of its covert war against Israel. You can clearly look at this map and understand how Iran has cultivated an entire set of proxy groups to counter and target Israel. From the Houthis of Yemen to Hamas, and even more recently the Islamic Jihad in Gaza Strip, to Hezbollah and its factions such as Kataib Hezbollah, based out of Lebanon and Iraq and Syria respectively. So these extremist groups are all cultivated, sponsored by Iran as part of this covert war. So to stand in solidarity with Hamas and the Palestinians, Hezbollah and the Houthis launched attacks against Israel. The Houthis, as you know, have targeted ships passing through the Red Sea and in the Arabian Sea, specifically targeting Israeli and American interests. The Houthis have even fired missiles at Israel of late. And the Hezbollah, from the southern parts of Lebanon, where it is based out of, has fired hundreds of rockets, missiles and armed drones towards northern Israel, leading to a crisis situation in northern Israel. So as Israel was preoccupied with targeting Hamas in Gaza, Israel also had to deal with these other proxies of Iran, that is the Houthis from Yemen and Hezbollah from Lebanon. Over the last few months, these attacks originating from Lebanon, carried out by Hezbollah, has displaced at least 70,000 Israelis in northern Israel. Several towns and villages in northern Israel were targeted by Hezbollah as it stood in solidarity with Hamas and gave support to Hamas in this war. So these attacks by Hezbollah from the north essentially led to displacement of thousands of Israelis, and this has pushed Israel to change its strategy in the ongoing war. See, as of today, Hamas stands weakened as a result of the war which has lasted for almost a year. Israel has used brutal force in the overt war in Gaza. It has taken out most of the top commanders of Hamas, and Hamas is on the brink of collapse. Recently, the chief of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, was also assassinated by Israel when the chief of Hamas was in Tehran as a state guest of Iran. So given these retaliatory strikes by Israel, Hamas stands weakened. But at the same time, global pressure is mounting on Israel to end the war in Gaza, to look for a ceasefire, to look for a peace agreement. Within Israel as well, especially the families of hostages who are still held by Hamas, they are pressurizing the far-right Netanyahu government to end this war in Gaza and secure the release of the hostages through a peace agreement. But the Israeli government is unlikely to settle for this. You need to understand the context in which Israel has shifted the war strategy, and the answers are found over here. Israel knows that Hamas is weakened, but it's not eliminated. Israel cannot claim a clear victory in Gaza as of now, as Hamas remains as a formidable outfit, even though its capabilities have been weakened. And for Netanyahu's government, any discussion with Hamas as part of the peace deal would be seen as a defeat, which could politically backfire on the Netanyahu government. Within Israel, there have been mass protests as well against the continued war. And don't forget the global pressure. Israel stands accused of committing a genocide against Palestinians. It's facing cases at International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court. There is tremendous pressure on Israel to end this war, to talk to Hamas with the help of mediators like Qatar, Egypt and United States. So Israel is in no mood to end the war in Gaza. So before ending the war, Israel would like to ensure that this opportunity created by last year's attack is used to the maximum potential possible. And Israel knows that this is probably once in a century opportunity to target the proxies of Iran as well. Because Iran will not hold back its sponsorship of these groups. And Israel at the same time will not settle for a peace agreement with Hamas without settling other issues with Hezbollah and the Houthis. Now, for Israel, the priority is to bring back and resettle the populations in northern Israel which have been displaced by the attacks carried out by Hezbollah. Even though Hamas stands weakened in Gaza, the attacks by Hezbollah continue to pose a threat. And it's in this context that recently Israel's Prime Minister and as well as Israel's Defense Minister, they made a big announcement. They announced a shift in Israeli strategy in the ongoing war. A couple of weeks ago, Israel publicly stated that the focus will shift from Gaza towards Lebanon, towards the northern borders, which was a clear indicator that Israel is all set to target Hezbollah. And as Israel committed, we have seen some dramatic developments take place over the last few days. In fact, if you look at the developments, it almost appears like the stuff of a spy thriller or a action oriented movie. Israel has resorted to overt and covert attacks, something which is unprecedented in scale and in execution, and has delivered a significant blow to Hezbollah. So let's see what developments have taken place, and based on that we can understand where the conflict stands as of today. But before discussing these developments, you need to know what exactly is Hezbollah. Why is Hezbollah a feared extremist organization? Why does Israel consider Hezbollah as the biggest threat in the region? See, Hezbollah is essentially a radical extremist political militant organization based out of Lebanon. Essentially a Shia extremist group with very close links to Iranian state agencies such as the IRGC. IRGC is a paramilitary force of Iran engaged in covert intelligence operations. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps is the state agency of Iran funding and training and arming these proxies that target Israel and even American interests. This group was founded in 1982 in the midst of the first Lebanon war. See, Lebanon, which is the northern neighbor of Israel, has always played a very important role as far as the Palestinian liberation movement is concerned. If you go back in time, in 1960s, 1970s, there was a Palestinian extremist organization called the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. The PLO was largely based out of Lebanon as it targeted Israel in order to liberate Palestine, which has been under the illegal occupation of Israel since 1948, as Israel violated the two-state solution of the UN and unilaterally declared independence and went on to annex and occupy illegally Palestinian territories. Since then, Palestinian armed groups have been fighting for independence. And the PLO, which was leading these extremist attacks against Israel, was based out of Lebanon back in the 60s and 70s. So in late 1970s and early 1980s, Israel launched major attacks into Lebanon to dismantle the PLO and to force the PLO out of Lebanon. Even back then we had a similar situation where northern Israel was repeatedly brought under attack by the PLO, which was based out of southern Lebanon. So Israeli defense forces carried out an invasion in 1982 to target the PLO, which led to the first Lebanon war. So as the PLO was targeted and weakened and pushed out of Lebanon, the Shia community, the majority community of Lebanon which was affected, stood up in rebellion against the Israeli atrocities which were being committed. Now, if you look at Lebanon and its society, it has a multi-ethnic, multi-religious society. It is a Shia majority country, but the Christian community and the Sunnis have been largely powerful and influential. Since colonial times and even post-independence, the Christian community in Lebanon has always been aligned with the Western powers, with US, UK, and of course with Israel. The Sunni community has been powerful as well, and this has always led the Shias of Lebanon to believe that they have been undermined. So when Israel invaded their country and further increased the oppression of the Shias, this led to unanimous support amongst large Shia population in Lebanon to stand up and offer resistance against the Israeli invasion. This is what led to the formation of a fundamentalist political extremist organization called the Hezbollah. The Hezbollah would immediately rely on support from Iran because by 1979 Iranian revolution had taken place. So a radical Shia Iran, which had sworn to wipe out Israel from the map, would go on to support and arm and train Hezbollah. And within years, Hezbollah became a formidable militant organization as well. In fact, in the 1982 First Lebanon War, Israel occupied parts of southern Lebanon to create a security buffer. After dismantling the PLO and pushing PLO out of Lebanon, Israel went on to occupy few strategic parts of southern Lebanon in order to create a security buffer to protect northern parts of Israel. So this continued occupation of Lebanese territory by Israeli defense forces is what really instigated the Shia community and added momentum for the rise of Hezbollah in the 80s and 90s. So Hezbollah not only emerged as a fundamentalist political organization that rallied the Shias against Israel, but also emerged as a formidable militant extremist organization capable of carrying out significant attacks against Israel. So Israel would hold on to these parts of southern Lebanon for another 18 years until the year 2000. From 1982 all the way till 2000, Israel remained in occupation of these parts of southern Lebanon, and throughout this period Hezbollah resisted the Israeli occupation and kept fighting against Israel. This is where the popularity of Hezbollah grew as one of the only organizations with the capabilities and the intent and the will to stand up against Israel. So amongst the extremist community and amongst those who support Palestinian liberation, Hezbollah became a legendary movement, and its leader Hassan Nasrallah, who came to power in 1990s, would be seen as a revered figure across the community, and this is what powered the rise of Hezbollah to power. In fact, Hezbollah would become a parallel state in Lebanon, not only in politics but even in Lebanon's society and economy. Hezbollah would become a parallel government of sorts. The government in Lebanon itself was weakened. Hezbollah would even contest elections in 1990s and later on and control the levers of power in Lebanon. So from the Lebanese society to its economy to politics has been largely controlled by Hezbollah, and as a result it emerged as a parallel state structure in Lebanon. So this is the rise of Hezbollah, and eventually the Hezbollah became so formidable with Iranian support that Israel was forced to give up its occupation of southern Lebanon in 2000. The IDF, which occupied southern Lebanon until then, retreated by 2000, thereby establishing Hezbollah as a formidable militant force and an extremist political organization that could stand up against Israel and support the Palestinian cause. Following this, Hezbollah was emboldened. As Israel retreated, Hezbollah saw this as a further opportunity, and Iran used Hezbollah to continue the attacks against Israel. This led to the Second Lebanon War in 2006, when Israel invaded the country again in a very similar manner to what you see today and carried out a major ground incursion along with airstrikes to dismantle Hezbollah. This conflict had a disastrous consequence as well. Even though Hezbollah was weakened, eventually Israel retreated and Hezbollah managed to regroup, and it has again emerged as a formidable extremist group that can target Israel repeatedly. So this has been the story of Hezbollah and the Israel-Lebanon conflict. Now much of the credit with regard to the rise of Hezbollah and the success that Hezbollah has seen against Israel in the past is attributed to its leader, who was recently eliminated, Hassan Nasrallah. Hassan Nasrallah is a revered legendary figure as far as the fundamentalist groups are concerned. He was a very close friend of the then Iranian supreme leader Ayatollah al-Khamenei. In fact, both of them had a common shared upbringing. They had a close personal connect with each other. So naturally, following the Iranian revolution, Iran would completely back Hezbollah and its leader who came up in the 90s. The founding leader had been killed by Israel, who was also very close to Iran. But following the killing of the founder of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah took over the leadership with Iran's support and backing, given his closeness and proximity to the supreme leader of Iran. So this is very clear that Hezbollah is closely linked to Iranian state agencies, and at the leadership level, both Hezbollah and Iran are directly connected. So over the decades, Hassan Nasrallah became even more popular, especially after Israel retreated in 2000 from southern Lebanon, and after Israel again suffered a setback following the 2006 Second Lebanon War. Hezbollah's popularity was firmly established in the region. So this is what leads Israel to perceive Hezbollah as the biggest threat, probably even more than Hamas. Because if you compare Hamas and Hezbollah, the capabilities of Hamas has largely been limited and restricted to Gaza and areas around that. But Hezbollah is one formidable force which is very well armed and equipped by Iran, which can deliver significant damage to Israel. So as Israel promised a new strategy in the war and shifted focus from Gaza to Lebanon, we have seen unprecedented developments happening in the last 2 weeks. A couple of weeks ago, we saw thousands of coordinated simultaneous explosions of communication devices such as pagers and walkie-talkies across Lebanon. This is something we covered as well a couple of weeks ago in a special session. Thousands of pagers and walkie-talkies which were used by Hezbollah commanders to communicate, they were covertly manipulated by Israel's Mossad, which is Israel's external intelligence agency. By interfering with the supply chain, Israel ensured that explosives were packed into these pagers and walkie-talkies which were remotely detonated, thereby killing few Hezbollah commanders and injuring thousands of Hezbollah fighters. Now this covert attack has not been claimed by Israel, but experts are very clear that Israel was behind this covert attack. This was just the beginning of Israel's assault on Hezbollah. When these developments occurred, we thought this was the biggest strike that Israel could possibly do. But after the pager and walkie-talkie explosions, Israel has further escalated the conflict. In fact, Israel has taken the next step in the ongoing escalation, and it has gone on to the extent of wiping out the leadership of Hezbollah. So these attacks that happened, it led to complete chaos and panic, not just in Lebanon, but even within the ranks of Hezbollah. Since the commanders and the fighters of Hezbollah were hit in the covert pager and walkie-talkie attack, this led to a psychological defeat for Hezbollah, triggering chaos and panic within the ranks because Israel was now everywhere. Through such a well-planned supply chain attack, which was remotely triggered, it was very clear that Israel had the ability to strike anywhere at any time it wanted. It clearly established the formidable intelligence network of Mossad, because without technical intelligence and, more importantly, ground level human intelligence, without infiltrating the group itself, Israel would have never been able to pull off such a precise attack. So given the scale of the pager and walkie-talkie explosions, there was already panic and chaos within the ranks of Hezbollah as several commanders were hit. In fact, the organization's morale had been weakened, and within few days, Israel mounted targeted airstrikes aimed at southern Lebanon and as well as at Beirut, the capital of Lebanon. Even civilian areas were targeted, which led to a controversy. Because see, Israel's allegation is that Hezbollah uses civilian homes and civilians as a human shield. Just like Israel has accused Hamas of using Palestinians as a human shield, it accused Hezbollah as well of storing missiles and rockets in civilian houses, which are later used to fire at northern Israel. So Israel treats such targets, even though they are civilian targets, as legitimate military targets. Now this is where you need to understand the military capabilities of Hezbollah. As I told you, Iran has very well funded and armed this outfit. Hezbollah is one of the most formidable extremist groups in the region, much more powerful than Hamas or the Houthis. Hezbollah possesses thousands of fighters in its ranks who are very well trained, highly motivated. More importantly, it is armed with thousands of rockets and missiles, including ballistic missiles, long-range missiles, anti-tank, anti-ship missiles, which can cause significant damage to Israel. That is why Israel has always set its sights on Hezbollah. So after weakening Hamas in Gaza, it adopted a shift in strategy, and as Israel committed, we saw a series of covert attacks, pager and walkie-talkie explosions aimed at Hezbollah fighters and its leadership. And then this was followed by intelligence-driven airstrikes to not just hit the arms or storage locations where rockets and missiles were stored in civilian houses, but there were targeted strikes in populated areas aimed at the leadership of Hezbollah. Senior commanders were taken out. In fact, few months ago, the second most important commander of Hezbollah, Fouad Shukr, had been assassinated in a similar targeted airstrike. But now Israel went to the next level, and after hunting the chief of Hezbollah for years, it finally managed to succeed in this operation, and it has assassinated Hassan Nasrallah, the chief of Hezbollah, the legendary figure, the revered figure as far as the Palestinian movement is concerned. Now this killing represents a big setback for Hezbollah, and Israel has not stopped at this. That's why the title of this video is Israel trying to decimate Hezbollah. The intent is very clear. The actions of Israel, both overt and covert, are very clear that Israel is trying to use up this opportunity to possibly wipe out Hezbollah entirely if possible. So along with taking out the chief, Hassan Nasrallah, several other senior commanders also have been targeted in these airstrikes and killed over the last few days. These back-to-back attacks has really broken the back of Hezbollah. Is that clear? And as anticipated, now Israel is gearing up for the next stage of the conflict. See, the killing of Hassan Nasrallah is without a doubt one of the biggest developments in West Asian geopolitics. In fact, you can equate this with the killing of Osama bin Laden as far as the US Al-Qaeda conflict was concerned. So this event is that significant. It's a ground-breaking event as far as West Asian geopolitics is concerned. It marks a big setback not just for Hezbollah but for Iran as well. So the targeted airstrike in a Beirut suburb took out the chief of Hezbollah along with few senior commanders who were in a meeting planning their retaliation against Israel. And in this attack, a senior IRGC commander also has been killed, clearly pointing towards Iran's state links with Hezbollah. So, over the last few days, after these pager and walkie-talkie explosions and these targeted airstrikes, Israel started amassing thousands of troops towards the Israel-Lebanon border, along with battle tanks, artillery guns and armored vehicles, which gave rise to suspicion that Israel is planning a full-on invasion similar to the First and Second Lebanon War. And as anticipated, today we have got reports, almost confirmed reports just few hours ago before the session, that Israel has indeed begun the ground invasion into southern Lebanon, which means that a bigger ground battle is likely to take place on the battlefield between the IDF and the Hezbollah fighters on the ground. Now what we need to understand is that what will be the implications of this? Will Israel really decimate Hezbollah? Is Hezbollah weakened and is it almost on the verge of defeat? Or will Hezbollah retreat? Or will Iran escalate? Or what could transpire on the battlefield? That is what we need to know, and we should understand how does it impact the region, how does it impact the Gaza war, how does it affect India. Now see, one thing is very clear. These major attacks that Israel has carried out without any hesitation, the audacity with which Israel has planned and executed these attacks, the precision with which the strikes have been carried out over the last few months, has without a doubt been a big setback and embarrassment, even a humiliation for Iran. Because see, the Houthis of Yemen have never been such a formidable force to threaten Israel. Apart from few attacks on ships and few missiles and drones fired at Israel, which were intercepted by Israel, the Houthis can't really deliver any significant damage as such. Even here, Israel has retaliated in the last few days. It has conducted similar airstrikes in Yemen, targeting key locations of the Houthis, such as the Hodeidah port, sending a clear message to the Houthis to back out and stay out of this conflict. But apart from targeting the Houthis, what is a setback for Iran is the weakening of Hamas, the weakening of Hezbollah, the elimination of its top leadership through covert and overt attacks, and the direct hits that Israel has delivered against Iran as well. This is what bothers Iran, and today Iran's proxy war is breaking up into an erratic conflict. See, the Hamas was not only weakened in Gaza, where hundreds and thousands of Hamas leaders have been taken out, but even its chief Ismail Haniyeh was killed. That too when he was in Iranian soil as a guest of Tehran. He was invited by Iran to attend the presidential inauguration following the death of former Iranian President Ibrahim el-Raisi, who died under mysterious circumstances. He died in a helicopter crash, which conspiracy theories indicate that Israel might have been involved in the helicopter crash. So the new president, the change in regime in Iran, led to the invite to Ismail Haniyeh, who until then was sheltered in Qatar. Israel would never dare target the chief of Hamas in Qatar, as he was under Qatar's protection, which is a close American ally. Any Israeli covert attempt to take out the Hamas chief in Qatar would have led to a backlash from Qatar and US. So Israel waited for the opportunity, and as Ismail Haniyeh traveled to Tehran for attending the presidential inauguration, a targeted strike was carried out on the safe house where Ismail Haniyeh was being protected by the IRGC, which clearly shows that Israel has infiltrated all these outfits, including Iranian security establishment, without human intelligence operatives on the ground, along with superior technical intelligence. Such precise operations can never be pulled off. That's why I said this is stuff which you often see in spy thrillers, in movies and web series, not in real life. But Israel has managed to do the unthinkable. So the killing of Ismail Haniyeh and the weakening of Hamas network in Gaza delivers a significant blow to Iran's proxy war. Parallelly, Hezbollah's top and mid leaders have been taken out. From Hassan Nasrallah to the senior commanders, the mid-level commanders, they have been eliminated, leaving Hezbollah almost leaderless. This is what gives Israel the confidence that it can invade Lebanon and even decimate and wipe out Hezbollah if needed. And parallelly, Israel has blatantly taken out Iranian officials as well, government officials. IRGC intelligence operatives have been repeatedly killed by Israel. It carried out an airstrike in Syria, targeting the Iranian diplomatic mission, where Iranian intelligence operatives were killed from IRGC. This led Iran to retaliate against Israel by firing hundreds of drones and missiles a few months ago, which we had covered again in our nuanced series. But Iran's attack has been largely a failure, as Israel has been able to defend and protect itself. Israel's legendary air defense systems, including the Iron Dome, intercepted most of the Iranian drones and missiles. So today, Iran is suffering its biggest setback, which is almost seen as a humiliation. So one likely outcome is that Iran could take a back seat. It could refrain from further escalation. It might allow the war between Israel and Hezbollah to play out with continued support to Hezbollah, but most likely Iran may not escalate because it has already suffered a big setback, a psychological defeat as well. So we might see a possible refrainment on Iran's part, because Iran knows very well that this may not be the time to strike. If Iran were to strike back, either directly or through its proxies, then Israel will not hold back. Israel will use the opportunity to widen the conflict and even directly maybe go to war with Iran. So that is a worst case scenario, which might even drag United States into the conflict. So experts are saying one possibility is that Iran might take a step back. It might continue the support, covert support to Hamas, Hezbollah and the Houthis, continue using the proxies, allow the war between Israel, Hamas, Israel, Hezbollah to play out, push for possibly a peaceful settlement eventually. It's unlikely that Iran is going to immediately retaliate. Definitely a direct retaliation is ruled out according to certain experts. So this is one possibility which marks the weakening of Iran's capabilities and influence. But the other experts argue that you can't write off Iran. Iran in itself is a very formidable military power with significant intelligence capabilities, with the capabilities to even carry out covert attacks. So Iran cannot be underestimated according to other experts. They are pointing out that Israel has repeatedly provoked Iran, from taking out the leaders of Hamas and Hezbollah to directly targeting Iran and weakening Iran's interest and influence. Israel has repeatedly provoked Iran, and Iran may not hold back. Iran has already sworn retaliation and revenge against Israel, and if that were to happen, which is the second possibility, then we might see a wider conflict breaking out in West Asia. Either the conflict could escalate between Israel and Iran's proxies, the war which we have seen over the last few months, that would continue but on a next higher level, where Iran would give even more support, arms and funds and required backing to step up the attacks and to try and target Israel, to take revenge for these attacks. Or it might eventually lead to a direct conflict between Israel and Iran. Right? So there are no best scenarios here. Each scenario is worse than the other. If Israel feels that Iran needs to be directly dealt with, Israel does have the capabilities to go and target Iran directly. So such a direct conflict which might possibly break out between Israel and Iran would draw in other powers including United States, Russia, and the regional powers Saudi Arabia, UAE, Turkey, with possibility of a wider conflict breaking out in the region. So this could set the stage for a much bigger conflict which could entirely destabilize West Asia with no certainty as to how the war is going to progress. So this is why several people are urging Israel, several governments are urging Israel, Israelis themselves, a lot of Israelis are urging Israel to take a step back, to talk to Hamas, to talk to Hezbollah, end the war, to look for a peaceful solution, because the humanitarian tragedy is mounting day by day. In just 2 weeks of overt and covert attacks in Lebanon, more than 1,000 Lebanese civilians have been killed, including several children. It has led to displacement of lakhs of Lebanese people. So the crisis in Gaza is being repeated in Lebanon. So this could lead to unintended consequences, large-scale refugee crisis, problems related to migration, and unprecedented economic chaos and social turmoil in the region. This could widen the sectarian divisions in the region as well and could easily spread to other countries, and the situation could become uncontrollable. So where does this leave India? That is my last point of discussion. All these developments which have occurred, which are very complex to even understand, where does this leave India? See, India has critical interests. That is something which is very obvious. Of course, we have energy interests in the region, as West Asian countries are the primary energy suppliers to India. As a import dependent country with nearly 85% crude oil coming from imports, almost 60% of our energy supply comes from West Asia, both oil and gas. So securing the supply chains would be crucial for us. We have a very large diaspora community, as you all know. More than 10 million Indians reside and work across West Asian countries. So any escalation of the conflict will lead to a direct threat to the safety, well-being of the Indian community. In fact, in Lebanon, thousands of Indians are stuck. We had a similar experience back in 2006 when the second Lebanon war began. Thousands of Indians were stuck and India had to carry out an evacuation mission called Operation Sukoon to rescue and evacuate the Indians from Lebanon. Recently, when the Gaza war broke out after the terror attack by Hamas, India carried out Operation Ajay from Israel to evacuate its citizens. So now we are contemplating another evacuation mission from Lebanon, as again there are few thousand Indians trapped in Lebanon. So these are some immediate concerns. But other than that, there are long-term strategic concerns that bothers India. See, India always follows an independent foreign policy. We have a very balanced approach towards West Asia. We have maintained good relations with Israel. We have maintained good relations with the Sunni powers, led by Saudi Arabia, UAE and the others. We have good ties with other middle powers like Qatar, and we have in general good relations with Shia powers led by Iran, Syria and Lebanon. We have taken a balanced position on the Israel-Palestine question. We have always stood with Palestine, supporting the two-state plan, supporting the creation of Palestine. We have even opposed Israel's continued occupation and the expansion of illegal Israeli settlements. But at the same time, we have protected Israel and its right to defend itself against terrorism. Right? It's very interesting to note that India itself has never banned or labeled Hamas and Hezbollah as terrorist organizations. Even though we treat some of the attacks as terror attacks, right, and support Israel to defend itself against terrorism, given the close security strategic ties between India and Israel, we balance it out by not labeling Hamas, Hezbollah as terrorist groups. Western countries, US, some European countries and Israel, of course treat Hamas, Hezbollah as terrorist organizations, but India doesn't. Officially, we have not banned these groups or designated these groups as terrorist organizations under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. That is something Israel is pressing for, but India would not do that because we are mindful of our interests with the Sunni and Shia countries. Because across the Muslim world, many governments and even the people in general, they look at Hamas and Hezbollah as liberation organizations, resistance organizations fighting against the atrocities of Israel. Right? So this is a battle of perceptions and we don't want to get caught in between them. We are looking to protect our own interests. So of late, there were some very positive developments for India. The US-Iran tensions had slightly reduced after Trump lost the last elections. Under Biden, US-Iran tensions had gone down, there was a possibility of resuming the nuclear talks to lift the American sanctions. With Iran, we have critical projects like the INSTC, Chabahar port, and key connectivity projects which are of great strategic importance for India to connect with Afghanistan and Central Asia. India, Iran, Russia are working on these trade routes and trade corridors, which is of crucial importance. But of course, our ties with Iran was affected when India was forced by US to follow the sanctions, and Iran has been upset with India. There has been friction in the relationship as India cut off oil trade and followed the American sanctions. Recently, Iran has even passed controversial remarks about India's handling of Kashmir. We covered this as well in a separate video where the Ayatollah, the supreme leader, made controversial comments about human rights situation in Kashmir and blamed India for mistreating Kashmiris. India rejected the statements, stating that these are internal issues of India and Iran has no right to comment on it. We asked Iran to look at itself and its human rights track record. So there is already a friction between India and Iran despite the close strategic relations we have generally enjoyed. But with the Sunni powers and Israel, there had been a lot of positive developments before last year's terror attack. The Abraham Accords, mediated by United States under Donald Trump, was a big breakthrough. It had led Sunni powers like UAE and Bahrain, which are aligned with Saudi, to recognize Israel and set up normal ties with Israel. Following this, even other countries in the region like Sudan and Morocco were convinced by US to recognize Israel and set up ties with Israel. It was leading to a normalization. It was this normalization that led India to form the I2U2 with Israel, UAE and United States and launch this economic initiative. It is this normalization which led to the launch of the IMEC corridor at last year's G20 to connect India with Middle East and Europe through an economic corridor involving a sea, rail and trade route that would connect these regions and boost the opportunities for all these countries. In general, we have been very close to Saudi and UAE over the last 14 years at least. Not only we have very close economic ties, but we have strategic defense and security relations as well. We've been able to pull Saudi UAE away from Pakistan's influence, and today these Sunni powers often side with India on questions of Kashmir or Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. Of late, the Sunni powers led by Saudi UAE are not backing Pakistan, rather they are siding with India. So these were very positive developments for India, as India had been able to really scale and build good relations with the Sunni powers and Israel with decent relations with Iran. This is how the situation was poised. But the conflict which has broken out since last year will affect this entire equation. See, another positive development which India was pinning its hopes on was last year's peace agreement between Iran and Saudi Arabia that was mediated by China. China achieved the unthinkable. It brought the Shia-Sunni rival power blocs together and negotiated a detente, leading the top Shia-Sunni rivals, Iran and Saudi respectively, to forego their rivalry and sign a peace agreement and restore diplomatic relations. This was a big breakthrough which created a perfect opportunity for India, which meant we could work with Israel and United States, work with the Sunni powers and work with Iran as well and the Shia powers. That would have served India's interests very well. But now the conflict and the escalation changes the entire dynamic. Abraham Accords have more or less become defunct and useless. IMEC corridor project may not take off. I2U2 may not see success unless and until the region stabilizes. Our investments in Chabahar port would be under risk as long as there is friction with Iran. Our focus on INSTC, Ashgabat agreement and these important trade and connectivity projects will never take off as long as Iran, Russia and others are locked in these conflicts. As Russia is locked in the Ukraine conflict, where Western countries are targeting Russia with sanctions, Iran also is being now targeted by Israel and United States, which is not good news for India. So if the war were to escalate either ways, right, let's say Iran uses proxies to retaliate and Israel uses it as an excuse to hit Iran and leads to a bigger war, dragging the US, that would be the absolute worst case scenario for India. Best case scenario would be Iran taking a back step. Now India, which has always urged for peace and diplomacy, would continue with that approach. It would like to prevent these possibilities. We would try to use our influence, be it with the Shia powers led by Iran or with Israel or with the Sunni powers, to urge everyone to take a step back. In fact, just the other day, PM Modi has spoken to Netanyahu after the killing of Hassan Nasrallah and has urged for peace and stability. India has said we stand with Israel and its right to defend itself against terrorism, but that doesn't give Israel a right to commit atrocities and escalate the conflict, leading to a larger destabilization of the region, because that goes clearly against Indian interests. So India has been putting pressure on Israel, a subtle pressure as well, and one would hope US to come to its right state of mind, as US has been backing Israel not just with diplomatic support but with financial and military support as well, which is essentially prolonging the conflict. So definitely for India, the choices are not going to be easy. Whatever happens, either ways, it will be difficult choices for India. But that is the world of diplomacy. It is a world of difficult choices, that too in uncertain times that we live in today. So this is still a developing story. It would be very early to 100% say what would be the future course, or to say with certainty that this is what is going to happen. So let's not jump to conclusions. Just look at the possibilities without any bias, without favoring either of the sides in this conflict. Let's purely look at this from India's perspective, how India's interests could be affected, how these developments impact the region and India. So I think that is what we have attempted in this session, and I hope you guys have understood everything. If you have any suggestions as far as the conflict is concerned, if you have your inputs or a way forward as to how the war could be brought to an end, please let me know in the comments and I will take a look at those comments later. So that is it for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again in a session as we continue to track these developments. That's it. Take care. Have a good night.